All right, guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through just one or two comments on YouTube, and then I'll be starting to do asks. I have quite a few of them. So let's just go ahead and dive in. This is the first comment. Did you see Norman's Insta post of the blonde girl at the bar ordering an angel shot because a man was making her uncomfortable? I thought this was weird and made me think of Beth. Maybe because she is maybe telling us she is in trouble and he will be saving her because he is, of course, the angel. Thank you for sending this in. I did see this that he posted, and I was pretty sure it was a story. I went back and just looked just now, and yeah, it's not there anymore, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I did watch it. So it's just for anyone who didn't see it, it's a video of a woman at a bar, and there's a guy bugging her, and she keeps telling him to stop and to leave her alone. And then she says to the bartender, I want an angel shot. And the bartender goes, I don't know what that is. What's in it? And she hands her a paper that, supposedly has the ingredients, and the bartender takes it and says, okay, I'll make it for you, and walks off. But really, for anybody who doesn't know, this is like a code. I've heard about it before, where you can say something like that to a bartender, and it's not really a type of drink. It's a code that says you need help. And so, presumably when she passed that paper with the ingredients, it really said, I need help. Will you call the police? And so the bartender went and called the police and then brought her a shot of something, so that it looked like she was actually making her a drink. And then pretty soon security came out and, escorted this young woman to her car so this guy wouldn't bother her. And when he left the bar, the police were out there waiting for him. So that's what it said. It was just this little video, and it wasn't long. It probably took me longer to explain what was happening than actually was the video. It was only a minute or so long. I didn't really think much of it. I thought this was just something Norman posted because he always is very, pro women's rights and being safe and being kind to one another and all that sort of thing. So I just kind of thought that's what it was. I was like, oh, that's cool that he posted that. I didn't even think about it as being TWT related. So, yeah, it's really interesting to think that it might be because, I mean, really, we're talking about some kind of rape situation or possible rape situation. And so it's kind of got Gorman vibes, right? So yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad you sent that in because I wouldn't have even thought of it that way. But yeah, I also think it could be in a very general way pointing to season three, if that was his intent, because we know that these young women are being sold, and obviously they're being sold for a specific reason. This is human trafficking. It's not like they're being taken somewhere to uh, you know, work as a seamstress or something. So it also could be pointing to that in general, but by extension, we also think that that is um a foreshadow, right, of Beth. So yeah, great conclusions there, and thank you for sending that in. Let's see. This one, yeah, I will read it, but I'm actually going to do a deconstruction of this later on, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. But big new reveal just dropped in new behind the scenes footage. Spoilers: Paz is in love with one of the girls offered up by the town, and they've been separated for, drumroll, 10 years. So Daryl and Paz are on a journey together to rescue the love of her life that she lost 10 years ago. Sound familiar? So yeah, there's a new behind the scenes little video. It's not very long, and actually we got a few really interesting things from that. But one of them is that, yeah, there is this couple, and they've been separated for 10 years, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that because probably in the next video after this, I'm going to deconstruct that a little bit more. But yeah, there's definitely some hints going on there. And it's so funny because we've, we've had so many questions about the timeline, and it feels like maybe it's changed a few times. I mean, the timeline in when they were going to bring Beth back and everything, but this feels like they created something that fits the timeline perfectly. And here we are, right? And now there's this couple that has been separated for 10 years and then just like stumbles back onto each other again. I mean, how is that not like Beth and Daryl, right? There's nobody else that he's been separated with from for 10 years, right? Even Rick, he hasn't been separated from Rick that long. So really interesting and making me more excited by the minute, right? But I will talk more about that in the next video, I promise. So this one is about when I said, maybe we should make sure that we are being respectful to people and, not being trolls online. And this one says, I absolutely plan to be nothing but positive and thank everyone involved on all my social media. We don't need to rub it in non-believers' faces. Just her showing up will be enough of a slap in the face. But I do look forward to the inevitable meltdown from the carolers. It will be entertaining. And I just said agreed, but we've got others going, I don't know. think I plan on going around saying nah, 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 nah to everyone. That just kind of made me laugh, so I thought I would read it. Okay, let's move on to the asks. Okay, first one. If we're talking about Beth going to Terminus, Maggie left Glenn a big sign to guide him there, so it wouldn't be difficult for Beth to happen upon that and connect the dots. Agreed. And I don't talk about that too much, or at least I haven't. But yeah, that's a good point. And I know that back in the day, when season 4 was on, people were talking about that a lot. They were talking about how, yeah, she wrote Glenn, she didn't write Beth, but people were even thinking, before Beth and Daryl got separated, that they might see the signs and head toward Terminus. And I think everybody kind of had headcanons one way or the other about that. And it's interesting because everything that they put in the show just feels so purposeful. And I believe that it is. But I know that the general audience can get really frustrated sometimes because it's not paid off right away or that we don't understand what the purpose of it was. And, certainly we didn't see any other thing with those signs other than Glenn actually seeing one of them, right, in season 4. But that doesn't mean that no one ever will, right? I mean, she painted those for the most part in blood and especially like on the cement wall, like that's not going anywhere. So, yeah, I mean, what they might have been is something that they will use in the missing 17 days, which is what you're saying here. And yeah, I agree. It very well could be. So yeah, I agree, and I hope that's the case. I hope that they bring in as many details as possible like this from season 3 and season 4 because it's going to be so fun to see those details come back into it and be like, I knew that meant something. And I think we're going to get a lot of that when Beth returns. So yeah, this is a really good point. Thanks for sending that in, and I hope you're right. I hope we see those signs again. Um, and yeah, it would definitely, in terms of the plot, that would definitely lead her to Terminus and maybe to, as I keep talking about, maybe to even to lead her to conclude that they died there, which could be why she never really looked for them. If she didn't, we don't, people keep saying that. Why would she not have looked for them? Why would she not have found them? We don't know that she hasn't looked for them. It's going to depend on whether she has memory issues or not. But it could be that she looked for them and just could never find them. They literally left the state, guys. And with no internet and no way to contact anyone, um, yeah, it would be a needle in a haystack. It would be hard for her to find them. So anyway, but yeah, great point. Thanks for sending that in. Next one. So I got a few of these. This is about the concept art for season 3. Really cool art. I liked looking at it, looking through it. People are always, especially on TD, we're always looking at the background and wondering if any of these people could be significant, or especially if they could be Beth. All I will say is that while I think they can sometimes put symbols of her in this concept art or, symbols of TD related stuff, I don't think they would ever actually put her in it before she's revealed. That would be stupid of them to do when they've gone to such lengths to keep it a secret. So I've never really thought that we would see anything like that, at least not before she's revealed. Once she is revealed, that's a whole different thing, of course. But overall, this is really fun art. We've got the motorcycle that's kind of in play here. Daryl and Carol, we've got this church kind of a thing behind them. So it's really fun. And yeah, just thanks for sending that in. Hi, can you Bethylize, aka put a Bethyl spin on the note in Find Me? I know we have said it has no name on it, but it's not like Daryl thinks he's writing it to Beth. I watched that episode once and never again. It's too icky. Sorry, Daryl. I only want you to do romantic things with Beth. I think most of us agree with you on that. And by the way, I think we need to make Bethylize a new word. So yeah, there's the thing is this could be a little bit of a can of worms, and you're gonna have to let me ramble a little bit because there's a lot of different ways I could take it. I think my biggest thing here is that we didn't know it at the time, so it was a little bit harder when the episode first came out. And we weren't entirely sure where they were going with it, but especially in light of Leah's return after that and how all of that turned out and what the writer said about it at that point. Um, what we do know now is that there was always an underlying toxicity to that relationship, but I don't know that Daryl was terribly aware of it at the time. He was in the throes of PTSD over having lost Rick. I mean, he was a mess, right, at the time. And so he probably couldn't really sense that. Um, and he just needed companionship of some kind. And that's where Leah came in, right? But I don't think he could necessarily see all the ways in which she was being uh, dishonest and a little manipulative. Um, and even Norman said, about when she returned, that the instant she took off her mask and Daryl saw that she was one of the Reapers, he immediately, in that instant, knew that she had grossly misrepresented herself to him. And so at that point, I think any question of a relationship for him was completely gone. Of course, they have a history, so he's still going to have a certain amount of compassion for her. And not that he hated her or wanted her dead or anything like that, but he knew she'd really lied to him. And he was like, I mean, at that point, he was like, nope, done, not going to happen. And of course, there were times when it seemed like he was leaning toward her again a little bit more, but that was mostly because he was lying to her and trying to figure out the situation and make sure all his friends got out okay and all of that, right? Um, it was him just trying to survive. But the point is, she was lying to him back then, and he just wasn't totally aware of it. So then we have him writing this note, and I know that what people have a problem with is it seems like let's see, what did the note say? It said, I think it said, I do belong with you, or we do belong together, and find me, right? So it makes it seem like it's a very romantic overture, from the outside, and it makes it seem like he was in love with her. I don't think he ever really was. I think he was really lost at the time. He was in a really dark place. And he definitely, obviously, by where we are in Daryl Dixon season 3, he obviously wants a romantic partner. He wants that relationship. He wants his happy ending, all of that. He wants that companionship. So I think, we had this moment in Find Me where he's in the woods with dog, presumably looking for Rick some more. And then he stops and we see him like, it's like a visual representation of him changing his mind. He stops and he goes, okay, maybe I screwed this up. And so then he goes back to the cabin looking for her. She's not there. And that's when he leaves the note. So the way that I interpret that is that he just suddenly thought, maybe I'm messing this up. He's second guessing his decision to leave her and thinking, maybe she is the one I'm supposed to be with. Maybe this is going to be my last chance to have romance in my life. And so I'm chasing something maybe that is dead and I should be there for the living, that sort of thing. And of course, we can't be inside his head, but I almost like to think that maybe at that point he thought of something that Beth told him or Beth taught him about caring more for the living, than for the dead or something like that. Um, and that's what made him decide to go back to Leah. But what I would argue here is that the note he wrote is less about Leah as an individual, and it's really more about Daryl. It's really more about what he is seeking, which is this, his soulmate, his other half, who he does belong with, and encouraging that person to find him. And of course, he's gearing that toward Leah in the moment, but he doesn't realize that Leah is not that person for him. And then once he does realize that, he doesn't make any more romantic overtures to her. So I think it was really more about his pain and what he's searching for. And in that sense, we can very much relate that to what is happening in the Daryl Dixon spinoff because he's very actively looking for his soulmate, right? His happy ending. And I will talk about this a little bit more in the next video when we get to that behind the scenes video because we're seeing more of it. Like they're showing us that there's going to be more of that. So, in season 2 when I'm going to forget his name, the French guy who stays behind because he finds that woman to be with. I'm just blanking on his name, I'm sorry. And we see Daryl looking at them as they're holding hands. We're seeing that he's going to be doing more of that in this season. He's going to see lovers together and he's going to be looking at them and, obviously thinking that that is something that he wants and that he's seeking. So it's continuing. Anyway, so like I said, I told you I was going to ramble a little bit. I just see it as in that moment, he was someone who wanted love. And so he wrote that note to the only person who was in his life at the time who, he could possibly have had love with. But it was less about her as a person, especially because the way she represented herself was untruthful. So you have to realize that if a relationship isn't based on absolute truth and transparency, it's not real. And that's what he realized with her. So that means that what he wrote, it wasn't real in the sense that Leah is not that person for him, but it was real in the sense that it was reflecting what he wanted in that moment. And he just has to find the person who is going to fulfill that for him. Clearly not Leah, unfortunately not Isabel, but also fortunately for us, we do think it'll be Beth and that she's going to show up. So, yeah, maybe I won't go into the rest too much. I mean, we could also bring in the whole changing your mind thing, which I've talked about before. And remember, let me just to give you a quick idea of the connection. In season 4, in Alone, when they were eating dinner, we have this conversation before him where he said they were going to hang around. And she said, I knew that you thought there were still good people. What changed your mind? And then this is where he looks at her and we get the oh moment, right? And the answer to what changed your mind is it's her. She changed his mind. It's Beth. Well, we've seen representations of that, of Daryl making a kind of hasty, knee-jerk decision and then changing his mind and going back to what he was originally going to do. And it's almost like in some way that leads him to romance. It hasn't obviously been that literally, because that's happened very few times, but um, even so, like I don't want to get into all of it yet, but we saw that in a very obvious way with Leah, and it is tangled up with the note he writes because he is out in the woods, he changes his mind, he goes back to her, he writes the note. I mean, those two things are directly tied. And I do believe that the changing his mind thing is a Beth thing and that we're going to see it again in some iteration when she returns. I have no idea what it'll look like. So, I mean, just try to think of it that way. She said, what changed your mind? And the answer was her. And then he changed his mind and he went and wrote this note. So in that way, the note is at least emotionally more about Beth than it was about Leah. Anyway, so I don't know if that makes sense. I hope I hope it doesn't. I didn't confuse you, but hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for the ask. Let's see, where are we at? I'll do one more. Bird mask. I feel like there's bird symbolism, even sans cage, that you've brought up before, but I don't remember what it is. So this is more concept art, really, really beautiful concept art. And this is what she means. There's a bird mask here. And it's part of the like the bone masks that I believe this is the same group as the guy who has the ram's horn mask, right? And the answer is yes, there has been bird symbolism. Obviously, there's the empty bird cage, but really, it's all part of the same symbolism because the bird. Okay, a couple of things here. Obviously, the bird represents something that makes music. So the bird is always going to be the songbird. But even the bird cage in classic literature, the caged bird represents someone who is a prisoner of some kind, right? That can't get out of the cage. And you have things like Maya Angelou's Why the Caged Bird Sings about being happy even when you're in captivity, about trying to get out of captivity. There's all kinds of um, variations on that theme. And so the empty bird cage kind of represents a bird that has gotten out of captivity, but sometimes it could also be that the bird died, one or the other. And so you can see how that's interesting for them to use the bird cage to represent that. In 4B, we had Carl walking through the pudding house and he finds a bird cage that is open and the bird is dead. And for a long time, I thought that had to be a Beth thing because, um, the bird cage we saw in her cell, and it was just always like a Beth symbolism, a Beth symbol, right? I think the bird cage represents someone being just gone. And the reason I think that now is because we see it very often before someone disappears or around the time someone disappears and is presumed dead. So we saw one next to Connie right before she disappeared in the caves. And that was very much a Beth proxy thing because she was gone for a long time. Daryl searched for her. A lot of people thought she was dead. Then she showed up alive. They reunited, right? We also saw one around Glenn. In his case, we didn't see it before. We saw it after he was revealed to be alive. But the point is, Maggie thought he was dead, was very worried that he was dead, but he was not. And there was a lot of Beth symbolism having to do with Glenn as well. Um, the interesting thing about the Carl one is that it had the dead bird. I have not ever seen that with any other character, that there is a dead bird outside the cage. And so while it might have been kind of a foreshadow of Beth and them thinking that she was dead, I actually do think that was a foreshadow of Carl. Um, and he's the dead bird because he actually did die in season 8. 8, 7, 8. And there's a lot of foreshadows of his death in that episode of the Pudding House. So anyway, my point is that birdcage is still a variation on the bird symbolism. And I won't go into it too much more than that. I will say that in Fear the Walking Dead, we see it a lot more. We often say that the spin-offs, like Fear the Walking Dead and the World Beyond, they were much more on the nose about the symbolism. So it's almost like the writers are using those spin-offs to kind of define the symbolism with more nuance, but it always is pretty vague, or at least more vague in the flagship show. So um, we saw the symbolism there. We saw bird symbolism really big around Alicia. She was bitten, got the virus. She had a fever, and she had it for months and didn't die. And then she ended up healing. So there's kind of a bite cure theory thing going on there. The fact that she was bitten and didn't actually die from it, even though she still did get sick. But she was presumed dead, and then once again, they brought her back and she reunited with some family. And there was a lot of bird symbolism around her. There was bird symbolism in the form of a story around Madison, and Madison they did a death fake out with. And then they did this whole thing too, where they used different kinds of birds, like different species, to represent different people and different um, personalities. So I will say we've seen it more there probably than in the main show, but this is what I mean when I say the bird cage symbol is just kind of an extension of the bird symbol. It doesn't mean something completely different. It's more like what's going on with the bird when you have the bird cage symbol. So the next question then is, what does this bird mask represent? What does it mean? My gut reaction to that would be kind of what I've already said, and that is that something about this group may lead to Beth or may lead to, Daryl finding out she's alive in some way. We talked about that when it comes to the ram's horn, because that represents the sacrifice, right, from the Abraham Isaac story in the Bible, or, what was sacrificed instead of the person, so they didn't have to die. So I don't know. I mean, maybe this bird mask also represents a songbird in the ranks or something, something to do with Beth. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm really excited to see what this group is and what this brings us and who they are and how they might or might not relate to Beth and lead to her in some way. So that's about what I have to say on that. I'll leave it there since we're kind of running long here. But yeah, there's a lot of bird symbolism. And so I'll see if I can find any of my old posts and link them in the show notes here in case anybody wants to read them. I don't know that I've talked about it in the videos all that much. They might just be old metas that I've written. But yeah, thanks for sending that in. And I'm going to call it there, guys. And I'll be back in a few days with some more.